I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and hit record so that as we get started here. Okay. Well, welcome to Loose Leaf. Today, we're really excited to have Fred Rutter with us. He has a new memoir out, and I know this is a little bit different for us on Loose Leaf, but I'm really excited to talk to you about it and find out a little bit more about you and this journey that you went on that led to your memoir. I'm going to start by reading your bio from your website. So Fred has been sober for decades and actively pursues a life of recovery and spirituality on a daily basis. He has lived in Central Ohio his whole life and resides in a small rural town in a very old and funky house along with his wife and a number of cats, which he says we may see today. This has served as a convenient location to travel the country extensively. Writing and photography have both been hobbies since adolescence. He has worked in warehouses, sales, a factory, construction. He's been a bartender, and he's driven trucks. He eventually gained stability through sobriety and retired following a 27-year career at Mid-Ohio Food Bank, primarily in transportation, logistics, and management. So the Mid-Ohio Food Bank distributes food to over 650 hunger relief agency partners across a 20-county area of central and eastern Ohio. And I'm thinking that's probably going to play a little bit of a part in your story today.
To some extent, it does, yeah.
Well, Fred, why don't you go ahead and tell us what else you would like us to know about you personally, and then we can talk about your memoir, Hitting the Road Without a Map.
Well, the bio did kind of, allude to the important aspects of my life, and that is, my life was kind of a mess for a long time. And then I did get sober, and it's through a 12-step program, and learn to, face my own character defects and try to improve my life on a daily basis. And in spite of that, life keeps throwing us curves, and we discover things that we really hadn't faced before or hadn't even recognized. And one of those recurring themes is facing fears. Yes. In our society, we don't like to talk about, oh, I'm afraid of something. The whole thing is we've got it all together, and
and none of us do.
And none of us do. That's the truth. Yeah. But at least through a program of recovery, I have a way, we all have a way of, looking at these things and finding out their source. With this particular memoir, the first one was I'd never driven a giant RV. I'd driven trucks. Yeah. And as the story kind of unfolded, one of the options was we were going to tow a car behind this thing. Well, I've driven trucks, but never semis. Towing a car behind something I've never driven was, rather freaking me out. And then the whole deal collapsed, and I thought I was out of it. So. Yeah. I breathed a sigh of relief, and then my buddy called me up. I was out in the yard doing something, and Tammy, my wife, thought that I was completely out of it. And he says, "So are you ready to go yet?" And well, no, I wasn't. So all of a sudden, all this stuff came back again. And even though I'd known this gentleman, I really didn't know him. And so, often when you talk to people about, oh, I wish I could go take a certain trip or go to a certain place, but I don't have the time and I don't have the money. And I would certainly want to go with somebody that I knew that would be compatible. And, that the usual one is your family, your spouse, well, this was not going to be any of that. And so I thought, I don't even know this guy. And we're going to be stuck together in a piece of tin, 37 feet long for the next week and a half.
Oh my
I
goodness.
don't know if this is such a good idea. And part of the other aspect is these just aren't my fears. My wife Tammy was dealing with things of her own, such as, we're a team. We had always wanted to travel together.
Yeah.
And here I was going to take off for Oregon without her. So, I'm abandoning my travel partner.
Yeah.
How will this impact the relationship?
Yeah.
What if we go off a cliff and that's the end?
How will she know? Oh my goodness.
Exactly. And then something else cropped up during the actual trip, and that was she started coughing up blood, and one of her biggest fears is that cancer.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there to provide support. So there were those various dynamics before the wheels even started rolling.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
So I've read I love to read. I love to write. But the things that I read are very enjoyable about travel. But you often really don't get to know what's going on in the writer's mind. It's kind of a greatest hits of things to see and do on a particular, geographical area. And,
right.
and the photographs are always, stunning, as if out of, shows my age, Life magazine,
yes,
or National Geographic. And you go there and, this doesn't look anything like what
because they caught that special moment.
Yeah. And I know enough about photography that in some cases, those pictures take weeks or months to take.
Yeah.
The right lighting, the clouds, everything. And then you get this gorgeous shot. And a perfect example, we wound up at Mount Rushmore. Well, it's on the south face of a cliff. Well, it really wasn't a cliff until they blew the mountain up to make a cliff. But anyway, that was for the lighting.
Yeah.
We show up after 5 o'clock and they stopped taking money at that time. And part of the reason was Mount Rushmore is no longer in the sun, and you look at it and it's just, 4 guys up in the shade in this cliff. Not quite what we were expecting. Took a picture of it anyway, because that's the way we saw it.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, so it's it weaves in, the book, and this is what it looks like, hitting the road without a map. It weaves, first of all, what was going on inside me, my wife, my thoughts, a little bit of background, how I got to a point like this, and then actually seizing on this opportunity. This was not really planned.
I was wondering, how did the whole trip happen? Like, where did that idea come from? Like, did you approach someone? Did someone approach you? Or
it was a kind of a combination of somebody approaching me. Well, actually, it's more me sticking my foot in my mouth.
Oh, the best way to start.
Yeah, a dear friend of mine, a couple actually, who I'd met in recovery. They were getting ready to retire and thought, they lived way in rural Southeast Ohio. It's Appalachia. And he had been a truck driver, and they decided, when we retire, we ought to, roll around the country in an RV. And so they bought one. and went out and did New England and stuff, and found out they really enjoyed it. But unfortunately, they got in a wreck, and the RV was totaled.
Oh no.
And so was the car they were towing behind it.
Oh wow.
The fact that they're even alive is amazing, because they were in Vermont in a dump truck pulling a bulldozer, lost his brakes, and came down the hill and sideswiped them.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, but they went, all right, we need another RV. So they got another RV, and then they started thinking about, well, maybe we ought to do this full time. We'll sell our house. So let's try this. And they went out and, did 3 months of wherever, and went, okay, we kind of see what we're going to do this, but we need a bigger RV. So they sold that one and then got this giant honker, 37 that slide out of it. It has a shower. It's got a skylight. It's,
wow.
Washer and dryer, a full kitchen. I mean,
wow.
It's amazing what is in these things. But it was designed for them to live full time. They're going to sell their mountaintop property, and that's what they're going to do. So they thought, well, we'll give this a shakedown, and before we pull the trigger on it, and took a trip. And before they left, Tom told me, he says, I don't feel so good. And well, there was a reason for that. Turned out he had lung cancer.
Oh no.
And so they had to come back early. He passed. And then our mutual friend, his wife, Amy, says, well, I'm going to try to do this on my own. And long story short, she realized that, that was their joint plan.
Yeah.
But with him gone, it was no longer a real plan. But she'd gone out west with a sister and ran into a college friend, and the college friend goes, hey, I'm moving to Portland, Oregon. Want to come with me? And she goes, why not? Everything's changed.
Yeah. And
so that's what she did, and sold the house, but the RV was still in Ohio. And it was, now I need this RV. She tried to sell it, but it wouldn't sell. And so this kind of mutual friend that I knew vaguely says, all right, I'll take it out there. And he's telling me that. And I said, well, that sounds interesting. And he goes, yeah, you can come with me. And then I was like, well, why not? Yeah. So I did, but then I thought everything fell apart, and I thought it was over. And then suddenly he calls me on Thursday. We're leaving. I'm leaving. Do you want to come? I got some plane tickets, and that Sunday we were rolling.
Wow. Wow.
So there's no time to prepare for it. Nothing.
Yeah.
And but in some of our conversations, I go, while you're checking this thing out, because he had done a bunch of repairs on it, I says, look and see if there's a road atlas or something. We need to figure out where we're going.
Yeah.
We knew we were going to someplace near Portland, because that's where Amy had moved. She did not have a place for it. We thought we might drop it off in a Walmart parking lot or something. We really didn't know. And when he arrives at my little town, I said, so is there an atlas in here? And he goes, no, but I've got a phone, how hard can this be? And halfway through the first day, we missed one of the major interstates we could have taken, which would have taken us more directly to Oregon. And by the time we figured it out, we were in the next state. We were in Illinois. Yeah. And I go, hey, Todd, I think we need a map. So that's how the title of the book came about.
I love it.
We literally hit the map.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that even though Todd's a truck driver for FedEx and a bunch of other companies, he knows nothing about geography. and thought that we could just get on Interstate 70
and go.
Well, Interstate 70 does not go clear across the country. It ends in western Colorado. And
oh no. And you're like, okay, now
so
what?
it's like, this ain't gonna work, we can make it work, but we really don't know what we're doing. And so it just kind of unfolded from there. But part of the self-discovery is that once we realized we had made this mistake and we were hundreds of miles off the track, and in order to fix this, we were going to have to drive almost to Kansas.
Oh my goodness.
The next interstate. It was like, well, now it really doesn't make any difference what we do. Yeah. We have kind of an end point. We know we're going to wind up in Northwest Oregon. We know it's kind of going to be a week and a half later, because even under the best circumstances of, say, driving 500 miles a day, it takes over 5 days to get from Ohio to Oregon.
Yeah.
It's a lot of driving, and a lot of things can change. And so it was like the next day is like, well, what would you like to see?
Yeah. Oh, fun. I love it.
And he goes, I'd like to go to, he said, I always wanted to go to Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah. Which is totally the opposite direction.
I want to go to Grand Canyon too, but that's in the southwest part of the country, not.
Not where you were.
Now, fortunately, Amy was paying for the fuel, so we had a debit card that we were going through, and this thing only gets 4.5 miles a gallon.
Oh, wow.
And so, when we fill up, we fill up. It's like $200 or $300
oh my gosh.
every time we fill up. And I said, I don't think she's going to buy, how we wound up in Arizona on our way to Oregon. And so he just casually goes, so where would you like to go? And I said, well, I always kind of wanted to see the Badlands. I said, well, where's that? And I said, well, not anywhere near where we are. So we went to the Badlands.
Oh my goodness. Oh, so
it was quite an experience. And then, as any road trip, you have mechanical breakdowns. And so the second night, the generator was giving us problems. And this whole thing took place, we left the last day of September. And so it's early October. Well, in the north and the northwest, winter comes early.
Yes.
And we were aware of that, but we really didn't know the implications, but knew that having a functioning generator to provide heat would really be a good thing. And so the second day we kind of got that straightened out. It was a fuel problem. And then the next night we were in the Badlands and the furnace blew up and
oh my goodness,
kind of ate itself up, the fans and everything. And so then we had to fix all that. And so that's kind of what the third day turned out to be. And it just kind of went on from there. And then everything, the parts that had blown off the thing burned up the next night inside the furnace, and the smoke alarms went off and drove us out of the RV. And fortunately, it didn't really catch on fire. It was just plastic smoke. And
oh my goodness. So this whole
what we got to see was just, we're from the Midwest. You can't imagine the wide open spaces.
Right.
You hear it, you read it, you see pictures, and it still does not compute until you're actually out there and realize that the horizon you are seeing is actually 50 miles away or even farther.
Yeah.
on a good day, if you find a high point in central Ohio, you might be able to see 30 miles, and that's kind of jaw-dropping
Yeah.
because you have to be at exactly the right spot on the right day with low humidity, and then, wow, I can see that, but 90% of the time you can't see that far, and a valley here is like, quarter mile wide,
Yeah.
not miles. And
Yeah.
it's just the scale of this country is amazing.
It
So we
really
just
is.
leveraged this whole thing of not knowing what we were doing to just being total license
To do
to
whatever
do
you
whatever
wanted.
we wanted to do.
I love
And
it. Oh my goodness. I know last year in January, I took my daughter out we were taking her to Rexburg, Idaho for college, but we took a really long route and we went the southern route, and we did go to the Grand Canyon. We did a Route 66 kind of loop to take her. And we had an exchange student with us. In his country, he said you could drive from end to end in 2 hours. So for him to experience, and we were just kind of in the middle of America. We never got, to the edges. It was just amazing, and I saw things that I've never seen. And I just think everybody should hit the road at least once in their life and just go.
Yeah.
Stop. So it sounds like your trip
I
really
describe this as being an unscripted journey. And, other than we had a destination, we had a goal,
yeah,
but we didn't have a plan.
yeah,
And in society today, you have to plan things down to the minute. Our meeting right now, is
right,
planned.
yes,
And when you can get into the mindset of it doesn't matter,
yeah,
nothing matters, you can do whatever you want to do, it is quite a liberating experience.
yeah.
So
It allows you to live in that moment and
that's
fully
exactly the
experience
point.
it.
That is the point. You're living in the moment. And I would have taken more pictures and things like that, but I was so stunned by what we were seeing. I didn't even pick up the camera. I'm just looking.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. If you don't mind, I'd like to read one of these quotes from the book that you have on your website. And
Sure.
I'll make sure that the links to your website are on the show notes as well. But I really, really like this, and it's a little bit long, so bear with me. Okay. Break the bonds of convention, hit the road. 2 siren calls percolating below the constraints of everyday busyness and fast-paced living in all of us. We tell ourselves we will do just that someday, but when the opportunity arises, do we recognize it and do we run with it? Life, responsibility, and guilt often hold us back. The reasons are always logical and justifiable, and yet we are left with a gnawing sense of regret for having not acted upon the chance. So what happens when we actually do it? The experiences will be different for each individual because circumstances and the emotional baggage we carry will be unique and alter our perspective to what unfolds. Much depends upon one's attitude. I love this because I felt like not just a road trip, but that really encapsulates our whole lives. I mean, we carry regrets and we have those moments where the opportunity comes up, and maybe because we're so planned with our schedules, we don't take that opportunity, and then we have the regret. And I love that you did this and then you wrote about it.
I have many regrets in my life. And some of it, is missed opportunities and something or other, it's always justifiable, but sometimes it's a very flimsy excuse because, I'm afraid to leave my comfort zone.
Right.
We all are, and
right.
And that was one of the aspects of this was, traveling with somebody that I had seen, let's say it's somebody that you see at church, you've seen them, every week for years, You don't really know them.
Right.
And so what is that going to be like? And so that's out of my comfort zone.
Right.
You know, these things hold us back. And then, you know, I don't want to live in regret. We'll always have regrets. We can't be absent of all these things, but it's these things play out in daily life. And it's part of what you mentioned earlier, you know, of being mindful of the moment, you know, living in the moment. Well, it isn't just the things that are surrounding us that we're experiencing, be it work or play or vacation or whatever. Part of the moment is what's inside of us and how it changes our perspective on that moment. You know, two people can be looking at, you know, a mountain or a canyon, and their impression is going to be different from each other because of what's inside.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times
and so I try to get in touch with that. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, a lot of times I think we don't stop and just feel and
absolutely.
think. And I love that. My guess is throughout the book, these are examples where you're talking about stopping and just really getting in touch with what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And yeah. And do you find that after this trip and getting your memoir out, that even though you still have regrets from choices earlier in your life, you're finding that your quality of life is so much better that you can look back on that and go, I learned something from those mistakes that have made you who you are today?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I have, you know, come to be okay with being okay, and that includes, you know, being okay with some of the dumb stuff I've done.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of what I describe as the baggage we carry along.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of the recovery program, 12-step program, is learning how to get rid of the baggage of the past.
Yeah.
And then learn how not to create the baggage of the future. Through attitudes and outlooks and being, you know, self-will run riot. You know, it's going to be my way or the highway, and just creating chaos around us. You have to learn how to stop doing all that stuff. So yeah, I was not carrying a whole lot of some of that baggage, but you know, there were things like the fears and things, but those were being let go as the trip went on.
Yeah.
It has been transformative. There are aspects of this particular trip, well, my life in general, but this trip in specifically, that are very spiritual in nature. You know, there's you know, where we went, who I even traveled with, could not have been a whole coincidence. You know, it could have gone wrong in so many ways, and yet people reading the book will go, well, it did go wrong. You did break down. You didn't know what you're doing. Well, if you're living in the moment, then you go, well, yeah, so what if the furnace blew up? You know, we'll just figure something else out. Or, you know, whatever. It's you try to wear this all as a loose garment and not be strangled by life and its demands and things like that. So you can see what all is around us. You know, you know, I try to maintain an attitude of gratitude all the time because it's so much better than the alternative.
Right.
And that is having feeling a life of regret.
Well, and you could have very much have felt like a victim of everything's going wrong and I didn't even have to do this. And, why can't it just be smooth sailing? But the truth is life is not like that. So this really is a metaphor for life, this journey. And like you said,
Yes.
you can choose to get down with it and be negative and throw a fit, or you can just go, okay, well, it happened. What are we going to do to move on? And just find your own inner happiness and peace with being okay. And, life is never going to be perfect. So I'm excited. I haven't had a chance to pick it up yet, but I do want to pick up your memoir and read it and experience this journey with you.
Well, good. I hope your listeners, feel the same way. There are things in it for everybody.
Yeah.
When we share our story, if we're open and honest about our own journeys, then there is something for everybody to pick up. Maybe not identify with the whole thing.
Yeah.
But if all of us were the same, then most of us would be non-essential.
Right.
We're all different. We're all individuals. We're going to see things. We're going to learn things in a different way. And by, like I say, being open and honest about these things, then, hopefully somebody will be able to take something from that. It may not be the spiritual journey. It may be just being brave enough to go out on the road and see what
new.
there is to see. And we got off the interstates, like I mentioned about, winter was coming. And for people who, do not live in the northern part of our country, even on the interstates, there are big gates that look like railroad crossings that close the road.
Yes.
And when you see those, it's kind of a reminder, if I'm out here at the wrong time, I can die out here. Because they literally close everything. And some places where these gates are, there's nothing. There is absolutely nothing there. And you have to turn around and figure out how to save your own behind.
Right.
And so we didn't run into bad snow, but it was early October. In Ohio, it was still 80 degrees and we're running into snow and and high wind, and even the locals are getting very concerned about this early storm, and so we had to pay attention to that. But one of these early weather events took us off the interstate. We were thinking about going to Yellowstone, but we were still 400 miles away when we realized, we need to start making our route towards Yellowstone. And so it took us on 2-lane roads for the next, day. And then as it turned out, there were more weather events. We did get to see Yellowstone, but then Yellowstone was closed and some of the roads north of it were closed due to snow.
Oh, wow.
So we had to head south.
Yeah.
And in Wyoming, it's wide open country. And
the wind gets fierce out there.
Yes. And it's 2-lane roads.
Yeah.
The towns are, we would go for hours and literally see maybe only one vehicle.
Yeah.
Maybe see one small town. We drove from Cody, Wyoming, down across the Continental Divide, and then finally wound up in this little town. We'd been seeing signs for it all along. Farson, Wyoming. And Farson is like a dozen trailers scattered pell-mell in the scrub trees and a gas station. That's Farson. but it's the only gas station for hours. So we stopped in Farson, and then there is kind of a bizarre conversation that took place in Farson that's on the website. I think I called it Getting the Real Story in Farson. And I don't know what this guy was talking about, but the roads out in Wyoming and most of the area, if you're on a main state road, they're wonderful. They're just desolate. And this road we had been following for hours, when we got to Farson, you look across the intersection and it looks kind of like an alley. It went from nice pavement to not so nice, and no berm and nothing. And
oh my goodness.
I asked this guy, so what's with the road across the way if you go straight? And his reply is, well, I wouldn't drive that at night.
You're like,
yeah,
I'm
well,
not
it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, buddy. So then he proceeds to explain that it's free range. And for folks not familiar with free range, there are designated areas out west that there are no fences. There's nothing. The animals rule. And then he says it's getting close to winter and the cattle out there are coming to the road because the ranchers that have these animals, they either come and pick them up or they drop hay on the road so that they can feed through the winter. And then there's antelope and there's all this other stuff. And then the guy asked, he says, so what are you driving? And I said, well, that thing out there at the fuel pump that's sucking your tank dry. He kind of looks at that and goes, yeah, well, if you leave now. So we did.
Oh my goodness. They didn't even tell you where it goes. Like you were just.
Well, yeah, well, I asked him, so where's it go? And he goes, well, it goes to the next road.
Great.
How far is that? It's about 30 miles. So I report this back to Todd, my driving partner, and he just looks at me and goes, well, this ought to be interesting.
Oh my
So
goodness.
by then he had hooked up some sort of satellite thing in the RV that if you stuck it in the dashboard, then you could actually get a satellite map through his phone.
Yeah.
And so we took off out across free range for the next 3.5, 4 hours. And
oh my goodness.
Saw antelope and,
I love
and there's nothing. There's nothing. There was a crossroad and about 5 miles in the distance, I could see a tanker truck. Why the hell he was out there, I have no idea. Driving along some ridge, and that was the only sign of habitation or whatever, for hours.
Yeah.
It was great. It was absolutely great.
And I don't think people understand, like you said, how freeing is just the best word I can think of to get out there and do something like that and just experience the country and nature and just being able to say, I'm not tied down to phone calls and my computer and this and that, and just kind of live, like really, really live. I mean, I think so much of the time we get so caught up in, well, I've got to do this and this, and we're just letting the world tell us how to live our life instead of stepping away and going, what's this really about? Why am I really here?
It's life is a matter of compromises, but it's also learning balance. And anybody, if we've ever watched somebody on a tightrope, balance is always changing. So it's not a static thing. And I think, I know for myself, I always want some sort of stability. I don't know what stability looks like. Yes, I have a roof over my head. Yes, most of the bills are paid for, but things are always changing, and so we're always having to learn to move with it. If we don't move, then we become very miserable and scared. And I know there was probably a point in time in my life that, had I been out in that wide openness, the it isn't desolation. You're so far away from everything that it's almost frightening.
Yeah.
And yet I'd had enough experience, Todd and I interacting, that I knew that no matter what happened, we would be okay.
Yeah.
And what a comforting feeling. We would be okay.
Yeah.
It's just, and then you just have to embrace that and continue moving. It'll be okay. Doesn't, explain what the outcome is.
Right.
It's living in the moment. This moment is okay.
Yeah.
And in the Buddhist thought that this moment is all we have.
Yeah.
Our lifetime is right now. Yeah. And the next now is another lifetime, which drives some people crazy. But I find that comforting. If I do the best I can now, then that's a lifetime of doing well.
Yes. I love that thought too. And I think, even those who have other spiritual beliefs beyond can still take a lot from that, because I know, actually my mom and I were just talking about this recently about, not expecting ourselves or others to be perfect, because, we believe that God thinks as long as you're doing the best you can right now, that's enough. And I think the world teaches us you're not enough on so many levels, that looking at that as this is my lifetime, and if I'm doing the best I can right now in this moment, then I'm enough. And you can let go of so much baggage that allows you to move forward a lot easier. So that living in that moment helps your future too.
Yes. Well, and even on the work front, trying to balance these things, sometimes I would move out of, what would be considered proper, just to see where the boundaries were. And I was in management, and I remember my boss telling me, you need to tell these truck drivers to blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I can tell them that, but don't expect it to happen.
Right.
It's like, well, it's your job to make it happen. And it's like, I understand what you're saying, but I can't make anybody do anything.
Right.
Really. And that was the wrong answer in a business situation. No, you will make them do that. Well, okay. So we have to learn where the kind of the boundaries are, but you like to test them every now and then and see philosophically, where other people stand. And she wasn't, no, your job is to make these guys do X, Y, Z. Okay. Yeah. Some of them might, some of them won't. I didn't bother saying that, but yeah.
Oh,
we'll deal with that as it comes up. I'll tell them. Yeah.
Well, I know we're getting close to our time here. So why don't you tell us where we can find the book? I know it just recently came out in February?
Yes. I really like the fact that it was all versions of it came out on Groundhog's Day.
Awesome.
I don't know what it is about Groundhog's Day, but I like it. To me, it means that spring is coming, but that's a diversion from your question, and that is Yes, it's in hardback, it's in softback. It's available online from, your major favorite online retailers,
Wonderful.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any independent bookstore. If you ask for it, if they don't already carry it, they can order it for you.
Nice.
It's published and distributed by Ingram. And so that is, probably the widest distribution for,
Right.
booksellers to acquire books. So it's available
Yeah.
however you want. The website has links to all of those. The website is Hitting the Road Without a Map. There's even a button on there that you can link with, you can find the nearest bookstore.
Oh,
It's under
nice.
indie books, and you can find a local bookstore and call them up or email them or walk on in, make sure you're wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And that's what's made promoting this book hard, is that,
Right.
during time of a virus, a pandemic, things have changed. And
Yeah.
so it's been interesting. It's
Yeah.
definitely been interesting.
It
And
surely
the
has.
publisher is Willow Moon Publishing. It's a small woman-owned publishing company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
And so their basic promise was, we'll help you put this book together and we'll
Yeah.
publish it.
Yeah.
But guess what? The marketing of it is on your shoulders. And so,
Yes.
and I was like, I know nothing about book marketing. Well, here's some websites for you to check out, and here's some pointers. And
And
good
do
luck.
the best you can. Yeah. But, and COVID really has made marketing hard because we're kind of stuck
Yeah.
to just doing everything online now. And I know some of us, we just do better in person. I'd much rather
Yeah,
be able
yeah,
to talk
absolutely.
to somebody than try to come up with images and plaster everywhere. But I'm glad that hopefully our few listeners will be able to connect with something today and go, hey, I think I'm going to check that out, because I know I've been kind of on this road of self-discovery for the last year as well. And I think COVID has been great for that, because it's a good time to step back and really reflect on, all that busyness, that you talked about in that quote I read. Is it really what's
Mhm.
important? What can I cut out so that I'm doing what's the most important to me? And, for me, that's writing. And so before we wrapped up, I did want to ask you, how did you decide to finally sit down and write this memoir? I mean, kind of what was your publishing journey from making the decision to, I'm going to write all this stuff down to where you are today?
Well, as mentioned in the bio, I write a lot. I'm usually working on several projects. Normally, they are short stories for personal pleasure. Um, and my wife said, well, you ought to write this down. I said, well, fortunately, I kept a journal when I did this.
Good.
And, it'll make a pretty cool short story. Well, the short story turned into about 30 pages. And she kept on pushing me. She says, I think there's a book in here. She's always been telling me I need to write a book. And I've never thought that I had a book in me.
Yeah.
I have stories, but never enough for a complete arc of, progression for a story. And the more I looked at it, I realized I think there might be something in here, and just kept on writing, fleshing it out. And I surprised myself. There was a book in there. It helps that there's a bunch of photographs in the book as well. So, if people just want to look at the pictures, that's fine too, But so it wasn't something new. It's something that I've done. I wrote a short story, and they're always narratives. We went to see the total eclipse of the sun a couple of years back, 2017. And, what a fantastic story.
Right.
I like I like history. It's important to record these events to me. Maybe half the world doesn't care. I don't care. I care.
Exactly.
So I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody will find it later and go, well, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just kind of, the book is an outgrowth of something that I've done for decades. And hopefully there's other books in me.
I bet there are. And if nothing else, you can always put together a collection of your short stories that you love and share those.
I have thought about that. There's some wild ones.
Those are all the better.
Yeah.
Because you can't make up, like, real life, you can't make up fiction as cool and as absurd sometimes as real life.
Yeah. I applaud fiction writers. How do they dream this stuff up? And really appreciate it. That's not quite how my mind works, but
thank goodness, right?
Yeah, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
But yes, real life can be, well, like the conversation with the guy in the gas station. I couldn't have thought that up. That's not a logical answer.
Oh, well,
yeah, don't drive at night. Well, that's not the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, that was my plan. Darn.
Yeah, I'm going to wait here for 6 hours and then we're going to drive this.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad that we were able to connect and you were able to come on here, because I love just talking to people who love to write and experience life. And, generally we have talked about fiction, and I think it's great for all of our listeners to know that they don't have to say, well, I must write fiction because that seems to be what sells. You have to write what's in your heart. You have to write the way you naturally flow, because in the end, you're not guaranteed anything. So you need to enjoy what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
And there's a market for everything.
Process. It really is. It takes practice. And this book, grew from 30 pages and it's now 286. But there were 8 rewrites and edits before it even got to the publisher.
Yeah.
And of course, then finding a publisher is a whole nother thing.
Right.
That's a journey in itself. And I don't believe that Willow Moon knew what they got a hold of, but God bless Jody Stapler for saying, yeah, that sounds cool. And then she had to deal with me. And then it went through another editing process. But it was pretty much a finished product by the time it got to that point. So
that's well, any last advice you would give to readers or people who just need to discover who they are? I know that's kind of a broad here, solve everybody's problems.
Well, it goes back to what you and I were just talking about through this whole thing. Don't be living in regrets. Pick up a pencil, a tablet, and start writing. And if it looks like something's coming to it, then, get on your computer or whatever, where's the best place for thoughts to flow? And then look at it and decide for yourself, is there something here? Can I make something of this? It's literally, to use a metaphor, starting with clay, your thoughts, your ideas are the clay. And then try to, mold it into something that is coherent to you. It doesn't have to look like Rodin's The Thinker. There's modern art that is pretty cool looking, but you still don't know what it is. So.
Right.
That can be your thoughts and emotions as well. That's the way I look at it.
Well, and most times that's the way our thoughts and emotions are in our head. They're just this muddled mess anyway. So
exactly.
I think for me, the process of writing is trying to take that and put it in a form that I can process. And then if someone else connects to it, that's like the bonus.
Yeah.
So, Well, Fred, thank you so much. I wish you the best, and I hope that things go well for you. And I hope that we see more of you in the future with more stories.
Well, and I hope that you and I get to touch base again too. This has been
Yes.
a real honor and a pleasure. And
Oh,
I hope that all your listeners have gotten something out of the time that they've spent. And a shameless plug. I hope they do buy the book and
yes.
find even more. So
Yes.
thank you very much for the opportunity.
You are more than welcome. And thank you for sharing your journey with us. I mean, that's kind of really what we're about. Loose Leaf is, I chose that name because I wanted to be able to talk about anything and to anyone I wanted and not pigeonhole ourselves into, hey, we're talking about science fiction writing or
Yeah.
whatever, but I really appreciate your journey and your willingness to share that with us. And it's been great.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop recording if I can find that button. There we go.